I have now seen every movie on the IMDb Top 100 list, and as a celebration for my accomplishment, I wanted to make a video about it. I didn't really know what to do. I was between going through all of them in order and giving a short review of them, or ranking all of them worst to best. But I decided to rank all of them worst to best because it's more on brand for this channel, and because it's more fun. I just love ranking stuff. It was difficult to do this though, because it changes all the time, and I kept on having to switch out the last few on the list. So sadly, The Apartment and Lawrence of Arabia won't make the list, even though they were in there for a while. But at the time as I'm writing this, these are the 100 highest rated movies of all time, according to IMDb, ranked from worst to best. Okay, we are opening off this list with an insanely hot take, and that is WALL-E at the bottom spot. Yeah, I talked about this in my Pixar ranking video. This movie is just not for me at all. I actually think I dislike it even more than I did then, and would probably put this like second to last in front of Brave. I just hate the overly simplified message of humans destroying the earth and becoming too lazy to live their own lives. It just feels like a PBS kids show, and none of the characters are interesting enough to pull me in either. WALL-E is annoying, and Eve just starts to become remotely interesting in the final few minutes, where her character does a complete 180 and falls in love with WALL-E. I never grew up with this movie, and I don't have any respect for it as I'm older. 2 out of 10, and the worst on the list. The Chaos Class Failed the Class came into the IMDb Top 100 like in the making of this video, so I had to sit down and watch it. And honestly, I'm just amused, like why is this random Turkish movie about a high school class that feels like a Disney Channel show on this list? It's part of a franchise that I will not be watching. It's just irritating, and I didn't know what was going on. It only has like 26,000 ratings, which is barely enough to even qualify for the IMDb Top 100, and it's one of the worst. 2 out of 10. City Lights and Charlie Chaplin in general is just not my thing. I'm not really into slapstick comedy. I'm more into like bizarre comedy that will have you thinking what is going on. Charlie Chaplin is just too on the nose, and it feels like these movies are just trying too hard. City Lights is my least favorite because it's a silent movie. 2 out of 10. Modern Times is another Charlie Chaplin movie, and it's probably the most famous because of that gear scene, but it's still just as unfunny and irritating as City Lights. It just has dialogue, so it's a bit better. 2 out of 10. As you probably could have guessed, The Great Dictator is up next, and it's my favorite of the Charlie Chaplin bunch, because I feel like it's at least trying to say something important, which I don't feel like his other two movies on this list really make a good attempt at. They are more focused on just stupid comedy. I still hate this movie, it sucks, and Charlie Chaplin was a horrible person. 2 out of 10. Okay, back to normal movies, we got Braveheart. This is a pretty big jump from the Charlie Chaplin movies, but it still sucks. I don't like historical epics in the first place, but this movie has so many added things that make it another level. Mel Gibson is so annoying in this movie. I mean, he always is. But in this movie, he's a stereotypical hero, leader character that just makes you want to roll your eyes. The damn Scottish accents are insufferable. Like, I'm sorry to Scotland, but I cannot bear it. This is a movie that takes place in Scotland, but it's so obviously trying to appeal to patriotic Americans with its overuse of the freedom themes. It's just lame if I could describe it in a word. 4 out of 10. Terminator 2 is another classic 90s movie that a lot of Americans love. This one just hasn't aged well in my opinion. The effects don't look great at all, and a lot of this movie relies on them to make it interesting. I don't even think fans of this movie believe the acting is good, because it's definitely not. The plot is pretty standard, with a human becoming friends with a different species, or in this case a robot. There's just nothing original about this movie, but even the original movie, which was original, wasn't good, so I don't know if it would be that much better if the plot line was more creative. 4 out of 10. Leon the Professional is one of many random 90s crime movies that get rated really highly on IMDb by 40-year-old white dads, and it's one of the worst. This movie relies a lot on the atmosphere it's trying to create, and it totally falls flat for me. There's no substance to this movie, just an attempt at style. I don't even mind overly stylistic movies, as you'll see later in this list, but this one fails at the one thing it's trying to do, and it just feels plain and stale. I also hate the scenes with Natalie Portman. They made me very uncomfortable. 4 out of 10. The Green Mile is another random 90s crime movie, and it's a tiny bit better than Leon the Professional because there's no weird and unnecessary gross scenes with 12-year-old girls. I still think it's so forgettable. Like, this is the same guy that made The Shawshank Redemption, a movie filled with personality, and it feels like it was made with effort. The Green Mile is literally just a piece of cardboard with some tear-jerking moments that try to make it something special. but I didn't care about any of these characters because the movie sucked for nearly 3 hours. 4 out of 10. Joker has been ripped to shreds in the last few years, ever since people started to look at it from a more critical view, but it's not the story problems that other people have with it that make me not like it. This movie is just so uncomfortable. I know it's the point, and I actually think it did a good job at making you have this awkward feeling, but I don't like movies like that, so I never once enjoyed this movie. 4 out of 10. Forrest Gump is really high on the IMDB list, which is still so weird to me. Like, this is a top 15 movie of all time. I just don't get it. It's way too long. Forrest's gimmick of being stupid enough to succeed in everything gets old really fast. Jenny sucks. And then the plot just shoehorns in a bunch of random historical events. The good parts of this movie don't come until the end, where Forrest finally finishes telling his story. And the Bubba scenes are pretty great too. But way too much of this movie is just a way of making people go, hey, I know who that is. 4 out of 10. I've already talked about The Dark Knight Rises, and my feelings haven't changed since that Nolan video. It's still the worst of a trilogy that I don't really like that much in the first place. Tries way too hard to be serious, despite the absurd plot lines, and the new side characters suck. 4 out of 10. 2001: A Space Odyssey being this low is probably the biggest hot take on this list, but with this many of the highest rated movies ever, you're bound to get a few that you don't fully agree with their high ratings. This movie is one of those things where people are like, you have to understand how revolutionary it was for its time. But influence has nothing to do with my enjoyment for a movie, and I had no enjoyment for this movie. Some of the cinematography and music is cool, but I'd rather just watch that one SpongeBob episode where Squidward goes to the future if I was looking for some introspective and groundbreaking sci-fi. 4 out of 10. Aliens is worse than the original, but not by a lot. I don't like these movies, they're boring and stupid. 4 out of 10. Alien is the best of the trilogy because it's the least absurd and has the best cinematography, but most of the time spent in this movie is random horror jump scares, but this time it's in space. Horror movies aren't really my thing most of the time because they lose all enjoyment when you know what's going to happen. As soon as I finish these movies, I just forget everything that happens. And when you compare that to some of the best movies of all time, you're gonna need a lot more than some cheap jump scares. 4 out of 10. Doctor Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, is another Kubrick movie that I would consider a product of its time. It just doesn't compare to the mind-shattering stuff he did later in his career, and it's hard to connect with anything going on for me. 4 out of 10. I'm gonna start to shorten up these segments as we get to movies I don't really care about, and 3 Idiots is one of them. It's the only Bollywood movie I've ever seen, and actually the last of the IMDb Top 100 I needed to watch, other than that random Turkish movie that got added in the last second. This movie just gives me a headache. It's too loud and long, but there's some cool emotional moments. 5 out of 10. I've already complained about Memento in my Nolan video and how I thought it was too confusing and there wasn't a reason for me to really give it all my focus, so I'm not going to do it again. 5 out of 10. Goodfellas is actually one of the only 2 Scorsese movies on this list, which is interesting. It's nowhere near my favorite though. I would probably rank it somewhere in the middle. I just don't like the narration, and all these annoying ass gangsters need to shut their ass up before I get a headache, except Joe Pesci, he's cool. 5 out of 10. Capernaum is a very obscure Arabic movie that I only know from this list, and honestly there's a reason this hasn't appealed to the mainstream audience. It's just really dark. This movie is just suffer porn. No good things happen, and it just shows the horrible effects that poverty has on you as a child. Except there's no emotion to this movie, just depression, which is why it didn't really click. 5 out of 10. The Hunt is a Danish movie from the experimental director Thomas Vinterberg, who is definitely not my favorite director in the world. This is another movie that is just too uncomfortable and weird. There's a lot of dark and disturbing topics that are better handled in movies that focus more on emotion and plot, rather than just grossing you out. This movie makes an attempt at it, but I just wanted it to end the whole time. 5 out of 10. Oh lord, Parasite is up next. Yeah, I know this is another scorching hot take, but I'm just being honest here. A lot of movies have this format where it's mostly build up, and then one big thing happens that the entire movie has been leading up to, and I very rarely like these movies. The reason that big moments like these work is because I build connections to the characters and get interested in what will happen to them. In this movie, I didn't even know their names. None of the character writing in any Bong Joon-ho movie, who would probably be my pick for the most overrated director, ever stand out to me. They're all just kind of filler characters to further move the plot, and I hate when movies do that. So the first hour and like 40 minutes or so of the movie is build up and getting to know these 2 families in the most surface level way possible, I feel like he just needed to add in a bunch of undercooked subplots and made so many characters because he didn't really know what to do with the main view, and it made me totally underwhelmed when the climax happened. 5 out of 10 because of the good cinematography. I actually enjoyed the first hour and a half of American History X a bit, and thought the themes of redemption and acceptance were pretty cool, but then the movie falls right on its face when they introduce the dad character in the backstory, and what happened in the final scene with the little brother. Edward Norton is pretty great in this movie though. 5 out of 10. To nobody's surprise, the entire Star Wars original trilogy is on here, and my least favorite is Return of the Jedi, which I think is a pretty standard take. Yeah, this movie feels more like fan service and trying to appeal to kids and commercial success instead of creating a great sci-fi story. The beginning stuff with the palace is awesome though, and just makes me even more frustrated that an otherwise amazing trilogy ended in such a disappointing way. 5 out of 10. I don't think anyone knows what 12th Fail is, but it is indeed on the IMDb Top 100 list, and it's not bad. This is another Indian movie, but it's not Bollywood like Three Idiots, which makes it easier to enjoy. The main plot is pretty standard, just a guy who doesn't cheat like the rest of his classmates in order to pass his class. It doesn't sound that interesting on paper, and outside of a few good interview scenes at the end, it's not executed that great either. It's a fine movie, but I'm not sure why the ratings are as high as this. 6 out of 10. Back to the Future is an 80s classic that still is probably the face of the decade when it comes to movies. I used to love this as a younger kid, but nowadays I just don't really care about it. Like, there's some cool sci-fi stuff and funny moments with Doc and Marty, but the main plot with him trying to get his parents to hook up is really awkward every time I watch it, and as someone who has no 80s nostalgia, I don't care about the setting or the way people talk, so I'm able to be more unbiased. This movie is a fine kids movie, but that's about it in my opinion. But I know it means a lot to some people, just not me. 6 out of 10. The Lion King used to be a movie I didn't like at all, and thought was really overrated. I still think that to an extent, as I don't think it's one of the best animated movies of all time or anything like that, which a lot of people believe. It's just alright. There's way better Disney movies from this era, like Aladdin and Hunchback from Notre Dame, I still don't know how to pronounce that. But this does have some great scenes, like the Mufasa dying scene, and pretty much anything with Scar. Just a lot of the things people have nostalgia for in this movie I find annoying, especially Timon and Pumbaa, and Simba to be honest. 6 out of 10. Nolan is all over this list, and Oppenheimer is another movie I already share my complaints about. It's just kinda boring to sum it up. 6 out of 10. Incendies, or Incendi, is a really shocking one to see on here, because I thought it was only loved by movie nerds, not the vast majority of people. A lot of this movie just feels pretty bland, and it could have been better if this interesting premise of a woman going through hell was given more time to build up an atmosphere, because this movie really never gave me a reason to be interested in this world and these characters. There are some awesome scenes though, like anytime Radiohead plays. 6 out of 10. Singing in the Rain was one of those classics that I always avoided because I didn't think I would like it. I don't love it, but in terms of old musicals, it's one of the best. The characters, other than Kathy, were charming and had good chemistry with each other. I also didn't hate the songs that much on their own, but I still don't like the way musicals just shove songs in there seemingly out of nowhere. It takes me out of the plot on most occasions, like this one. Not bad though for musicals. 6 out of 10. The Lives of Others is just kind of like a movie that exists for me. Like, nobody really loves this movie as far as I know. Everyone watches it and is like, that was pretty good. The plot is solid, the cinematography is great, and the whole thing flows really well. It's just kind of a blank spot in my mind for the most part. Like, I know it exists, I just don't care for some reason. 6 out of 10. Psycho is the original horror slasher classic, and I still like it more than most legendary horror movies. The first part with the original main girl was intense and had me on the edge of my seat. There's just this feeling of intensity and dread the whole time. There's a reason Hitchcock is called the master of suspense. The beginning of this movie is some of his best work. But then, I guess a spoiler, the girl dies, which hopefully isn't a spoiler at this point, and then it just turns into a pretty standard investigating crime movie. One of Hitchcock's worst classics in my opinion. 6 out of 10. The Usual Suspects is another one of those movies where the main thing that makes it memorable is the final 10 minutes, but the plot twist is actually really well done, and the acting is a lot better than movies like Parasite, which is why it's above it, but it also feels like a stale 90s crime movie for most of the time, so a 6 out of 10. I've already talked about The Dark Knight. It's the best serious superhero movie, but I just don't really like serious superhero movies. They end up feeling dumber than the dumb ones. Heath Ledger is awesome though, and his scenes are all great. I didn't rant about Two-Face in my Nolan video, but he is a horrible villain that should have been cut from the movie. 7 out of 10. It's also crazy, this is like top 3 on there. Going into this ranking, there were about 8 movies I hadn't seen, and Amadeus was the one I was dreading the most. I didn't like period pieces outside of a very few movies, and the 3-hour one, as I watched the director's cut, was literally my worst nightmare. And for like an hour, it was just as bad as I thought it would be. Mozart is annoying as hell, the plot moves super slow, and everyone in the movie looks like a loser, but it got way better as Mozart got sick, and we started to go in a more emotional and character-driven route. The scene where Salieri helps Mozart with his Requiem is amazing. 7 out of 10. Django Unchained is a very fun, but also very flawed Tarantino movie. I think the plot kinda goes all over the place, and loses its focus when Leo is introduced and Christoph Waltz's character is put to the side. And then the final sequence where he's out of the plantation, it really starts to lose its identity and what made it so interesting in the first place. Still good, 7 out of 10. The Untouchables is another movie from this list that I always avoided because it just looked lame, but it's actually not. I used to think this was in English, so I was very surprised to learn it was a French movie, but I was happy because I do like French movies a lot. The friendship between the main two characters was wholesome, and the whole movie was a fun vibe. But a lot of it was kind of generic at times, and the white guy looked so much like Dustin Hoffman that it genuinely concerned me. 7 out of 10. The Godfather Part 2 is a really well-made movie in basically every way from a technical standpoint. The cinematography is just as phenomenal as the first one, the score is awesome, and the acting is some of the best ever, especially from the legendary Al Pacino. But this movie has so many moments that left me flat out bored. I was never bored in the first one. And there are so many moments in this movie that are incredible, like anything between Michael and Fredo, and it makes me frustrated that it went in the direction that it did. I believe the De Niro flashbacks are amazing on their own, but they do not fit in the context of this movie at all. I understand it shows the parallels of Vito and Michael, but it was really hard for me to be interested in both sides as so much was going on with their unique plots. I really think they should have made a separate prequel movie, instead of trying to include both plot lines in one movie, as it also results in it being a bit too long. Both of these plot lines are great if you were to take them apart and make them separate movies, but it makes for a full movie experience that was really difficult for me to be fully engaged with. 7 out of 10. Toy Story is the second Pixar movie on this list, and there's actually quite a few of them, which is pretty interesting. I really like Pixar. I made a whole video ranking all of them. Toy Story was the one that started it all. Both Pixar and fully 3D animated movies in general, and it is still a pretty good movie. The only complaint that I really have with this movie is that the animation looks really bad. I understand why, but it did make for an awkward viewing experience at times, but the script is still awesome, and it's a really funny movie too. 7 out of 10. Saving Private Ryan is mostly known for the opening D-Day sequence, which is definitely the best part of the movie, but the whole thing is really entertaining and has a few moments that really leave an impact on you. My favorite parts of this movie are the ones when there's no fighting or action, just the scenes where these people are chilling around and talking about their experiences, especially the scene in the church, which has some of the most impactful dialogue of the movie. Spielberg does a really good job of getting you connected to these characters, so you care a lot more about them when they go through these difficult moments. This is more of an adventure movie than a war movie after the D-Day sequence, but I think that's fine. 8 out of 10. Now we're gonna get into a lot of movies that I think are pretty great, but I don't really have a real attachment for. The Prestige is maybe Nolan's most impressive feat from a directing standpoint. The non-linear storytelling is surprisingly easy to understand, which I think some of his movies struggle with. The rivalry between the main characters is well done, and the acting from Bale and Jackman definitely helps that. The plot twists are genuinely shocking, and this movie is just pretty great. 8 out of 10. Gladiator is a really well done historical epic with some great acting. Both Phoenix and Crow are great and make this an intense and emotional movie. I also think the action scenes, which I usually don't really care about, are awesome and have me locked in. I'm also really into Roman times and the history of their empire, so that definitely helps when the story isn't moving as much in the middle. 8 out of 10. Avengers Endgame is an epic conclusion to a saga that lasted for 11 years. I'm quite a big fan of the Infinity Saga. I was a part of it when they were initially coming out, and I still revisit a lot of the movies as I think they hold up on their own. Endgame is one I don't watch as much though, because of its 3-hour length, but I still think it did a great job at balancing a really good story with some fun fan service.
I don't know what the hell is going on in the MCU nowadays, but I'm glad the original saga got a fitting conclusion. 8 out of 10. Fight Club is one of those movies that every American high schooler praises like crazy and bases their whole personality off of, but I think it holds up as an actual movie as well. This movie has been so misinterpreted by our current society to the point that I don't even know what to say about it. It's still great though, despite the reputation it has now of being the ultimate film bro movie, and that's mostly because of David Fincher's awesome direction. Brad Pitt is also peaking here in every way. 8 out of 10. Good Will Hunting is a movie that I used to love and I still do think is pretty great, but it gets weaker the more I think about it. This movie has 2 or 3 scenes that are still amazing, and you know what the main one is if you've seen it, but I think a lot of the scenes and plot lines in this movie are on the weaker side. My biggest problem with this movie is the relationship between Will and the girl. I just don't think it was an essential part to Will's character arc and ended in an uninteresting way, but all the Robin Williams scenes are great. The emotional beats all land, and Elliott Smith has like 5 songs in here, so 8 out of 10. Life is Beautiful does a really incredible job at creating comedy and wholesomeness in a very horrible situation. A lot of movies try to do this, like Jojo Rabbit, which is the most popular one, but none of them do it like Life is Beautiful. The relationship between Guido and his family gives the movie a sense of optimism and hope, even though deep down you know that this movie can never end well. It's devastating, but reminds you that any situation could become better if you have a positive mindset, and that's a great message that you never see in movies about atrocities like the Holocaust. 8 out of 10. The Departed is the best Scorsese movie on this list, and just one of my favorite Scorsese movies. I usually don't really like his gangster stuff, but this one does a great job at moving the story at a perfect pace. It never feels too fast or slow. Everything takes its time as the story is really complicated, but something is always happening in this movie, so you're never bored. At least I wasn't bored. I also think the acting, especially from Nicholson, is great, and just the right amount of over the top. 8 out of 10. Casablanca, or Casablanca, I actually don't know how to pronounce this movie, which is kind of crazy, is one of the few classic Hollywood movies on this list, and it really is the essential classic Hollywood movie. Somehow Citizen Kane isn't on here, which is crazy, but I don't think it's better than this movie. I mean, everyone knows why this movie works. The script is one of the best of all time. The dialogue is so sharp and makes it so every scene, no matter how uneventful, is really entertaining. The acting from Bogart and Bergman is also legendary, just like this whole movie. 8 out of 10. Princess Mononoke is one of many Studio Ghibli movies that you will see show up on this list. I'm not as big of a fan of Princess Mononoke as some die-hard Ghibli fans, but I still think it's a great movie. It's definitely the most mature Miyazaki, focusing on themes of poverty and war, compared to usual fantastical stories that appeal to a wider audience. I still think those movies are really mature and have messages just as powerful, but Princess Mononoke does have a different vibe to other Miyazaki movies. It feels more like an anime than other Ghibli movies. 8 out of 10. The Pianist is a really dark and brutal Holocaust movie that also has some moments that show hope, especially the stuff with Adrien Brody and his relationship with his piano, which honestly I wish was explored a bit more, but this movie is still really well made, the direction is great, and Adrien Brody gives maybe the best performance of his career, either this or The Brutalist. It does lack originality at times, as this being a Holocaust movie, but I mean it is based off a real story, and it's still pretty great. It's also insane, this is the only Polanski movie on here. There's no Chinatown, which is insane. Yeah, 8 out of 10. Coco honestly has grown on me a lot since my Pixar ranking. I no longer think the beginning and middle is weak compared to the end. I mean, the end is still obviously the best part, but the whole movie is full of great moments, and the main dynamic between Miguel and Hector makes the journey elements really entertaining. But yeah, that ending is just so good and so emotional, probably the best of any Pixar movie. It hits even harder as I get older and watch it more, to be honest. 8 out of 10. It's a Wonderful Life is without a doubt the most legendary holiday movie of all time, and I think if there was one holiday movie that deserves that title, it's probably It's a Wonderful Life. I mean, this movie just makes you happy, it puts you in a good mood, which is what holiday movies are supposed to do, but it also has some real commentary on social issues and corruption in society. The ending with the angel stuff somehow works despite it not really making sense, as the rest of the movie is pretty grounded, but this is one of those movies where it's more about the feeling of happiness that it creates, especially in the final act. 8 out of 10.
Witness for the Prosecution is not one of the most popular Billy Wilder movies, but it is one of his most acclaimed movies, and I think it deserves to be. It's definitely not my favorite. Even on this list, there's a better one, and there's a few other ones that I like just as much. But I do think Witness for the Prosecution is a pretty damn great movie. It just shows his talent as a director to make this whole thing flow perfectly, but never make you feel like you know what is going to happen. It's one of the great courtroom dramas, because of the case that the movie is focusing on, has so many twists and turns that will have you shocked, especially the final 10 minutes, which has one of the best plot twists of all time. 8 out of 10. The original Star Wars movie is one of the most iconic movies of all time, as it kicked off the most iconic movie franchise of all time. But I feel like it's easy to forget just how well made and well written this movie is when you look at what Star Wars ended up becoming in the future. This is one of the best sci-fi movies ever. It's focused much more on the characters and their development, especially Luke. The character dynamics are all great. Luke and Han Solo is my favorite, and one of my favorite movie friendships, and Vader as the villain is obviously amazing. This is the clear second best Star Wars movie in my opinion. 8 out of 10. Paths of Glory is one of the best anti-war movies ever made. It's not so much about the action on the front lines that a lot of other war movies focus on, it's more of a courtroom drama and a political movie, which makes the message much stronger. The ending sequence makes you think and put things into perspective as it shows the corruption that takes place during war. Sometimes countries can damage their own men more than men from other countries, and this movie especially exposes the atrocities that the higher-ups in the military commit in order to protect their reputation. It's still one of the most emotional war movies ever made, and Kubrick's best war movie. 8 out of 10. Old Boy is a movie that immediately became one of my favorites when I first watched it. It has grown off of me a bit over the years, but I still vividly remember watching this for the first time. The ending plot twist is still one of those moments that I just randomly think about, but I think it also overshadows the rest of the movie for a lot of people. Like, this whole movie is perfectly made and has such a dark and gritty atmosphere, as well as an engaging story where you never know what to expect. It definitely is a movie that is best enjoyed on a first viewing, as it's the only time that plot twist can fully make an impact, but it still is a great movie the entire time. The Handmaiden is definitely better though. 8 out of 10. Whiplash is a movie that like every single guy likes. It's one of those Fight Club type of movies where people completely misunderstand like everything the plot is going for, and think that it's about working hard to achieve your goals, which is not what the message is. But they are still right, this movie is awesome. The acting is probably the best part. Teller and Simmons bring so much intensity and energy that it's hard to look away. This is one of those movies that just makes you stress out and has your heart beating the entire time. This really is an exhilarating movie. I think I prefer La La Land, but Whiplash is still an awesome movie. 9 out of 10. Reservoir Dogs is another Tarantino movie, and it's definitely one of the best. I believe he is the most common guy on the list. Maybe Nolan has more, but they both have a ton. I do prefer Tarantino as a director, and Reservoir Dogs is one of the most Tarantino-feeling Tarantino movies. It makes sense because it is his debut, and he was showing his cards immediately with non-linear storytelling, funny and unique dialogue, and clear influences from other classic movies. The cast of characters here are probably the best part. My favorite is Steve Buscemi, but everyone is memorable and makes this thing work so well. The stuck in the middle with you scene is still so amazing to this day. 9 out of 10. Seven is probably my favorite David Fincher movie if I had to narrow it down. It just sums up everything that makes him such an awesome director. All the action scenes are so intense and have you so invested. The movie is known for its insane ending, and I don't really have a problem with that because it's definitely the best part of the movie, but the entire thing is pretty awesome in my opinion. But yeah, that ending is just unbelievable. I'll never forget watching that for the first time. 9 out of 10. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is a movie I've seen like 50 times, and that's because it's just awesome. Like, this movie is so cool, I can't believe it even exists. I know it feels like it's been said a billion times, but it really is like a comic book coming to life. I also think the story and character development is awesome too, along with the animation. Everything is just done so well, and it's one of my favorite superhero movies. 9 out of 10. The Matrix is one of the essential sci-fi movies, and you still hear references to it to this day. The blue or red pill, bullet time, escape of the Matrix. I mean, so many iconic things came from this movie, and that's because it's awesome. This movie isn't just good because of the amazing effects and intense action scenes. The entire idea of the Matrix and escaping a simulation is just so cool and puts a lot of things into perspective. This also has to go down as the movie with the sickest character names. Neo, Morpheus, Trinity. The writers were cooking when naming these people. 9 out of 10. Rear Window is one of my favorite Hitchcock movies and the best on this list. In fact, I think it is my favorite Hitchcock movie if I had to pick one. It's just perfectly made. Hitchcock is a weird guy because it's hard to explain why his movies are so awesome. The only way you can know is when you watch it. I know that could be said for every movie to an extent, but I can better explain why I like a movie from Kubrick or Kurosawa. I think that's why none of the best Hitchcock movies I would call masterpieces or personal favorites, even though I know they're pretty great. Rear Window is the best though, because the intense scenes are so intense, even if it's just a guy in his room the whole time. This is also my favorite Jimmy Stewart performance probably. 9 out of 10. American Beauty is a weird movie to talk about because of the whole Kevin Spacey being a garbage piece of shit thing that has come to light in recent years, and the subject matter of this movie just makes it feel kind of weird. But this movie is awesome. It focuses on going against the norm and the society that you're born in, but it does it in a way that doesn't feel like a corny teenager rebelling against their parents. Lester is a piece of crap, but it's still so fun seeing him blackmail his boss and exposing his wife. It's just satisfying. This movie criticizes the suburban lifestyle and how everyone just turns into a bunch of lonely, depressed people by showing the free thinking that younger people have and making it clear that adults can still get back to that instead of falling into the trap. Kevin Spacey also is amazing in this. 9 out of 10. Sunset Boulevard is my favorite Billy Wilder movie, and I think most people think it's the best too. It's just such a classic, and has all the elements that make him such a special writer and director. This is his best script for sure in my eyes. All the dialogue between Norma Desmond and Joe Gillis is sharp and witty, but it doesn't feel inhumane or robotic like some old Hollywood movies. It's the peak of these kinds of movies when it comes to dialogue, and I think it's the best part of the movie. It's also so different from other movies from this era, which makes it such a fun experience because you think to yourself, they could do that back then? Norma Desmond is also just an all-time great character. 9 out of 10. Inglourious Basterds is another awesome Tarantino movie. It's one of the most unique war movies ever made, as it never really tries to go against war. It turns it into a fun, almost western kind of movie, which makes it so fun. Hans Landa is also one of the best villains. 9 out of 10. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest has a really good story and a bunch of well-written characters that get you connected to the people in the mental health ward. It would be a good movie on its own, but it's ascended to an amazing movie because of the unbelievable performance by Jack Nicholson. I really do think this is the best performance of all time. Every scene you just forget that he's acting, and the amount of detail and effort put into the character he plays is something that cannot be replicated. It's not the loudest performance, and there's no method acting. It's just watching someone who mastered their craft, like Jimi Hendrix shredding on guitar, Michael Jordan dropping 50, Tom Brady leading a game-winning drive. He's so good that Louise Fletcher as Nurse Ratched, which is another amazing performance, gets totally overshadowed. 9 out of 10. Inception is a Nolan classic, and I think it's the second best movie. I gave this movie its praises in my Nolan video. I think it nails the emotional beats, which is key to make a Nolan movie work for me, but it also just has such an awesome premise that even without the great writing, it would make for a good time. 9 out of 10. Indiana Jones Raiders of the Lost Ark is the most iconic adventure movie of all time, and that's because it's just one of those movies that's perfectly made. Spielberg has a lot of those, making movies that's accessible to all audiences and can be rewatched over and over again. It has awesome action, a lovable and charismatic main character, an amazing John Williams score, and an engaging plot that doesn't need that much focus to get into. Everyone loves this movie, and that's because it's just awesome. I don't have any complaints, but I also just don't have a connection to this movie, as I didn't really grow up with it, and there's not much emotion to latch onto, but it still totally rules. 9 out of 10. Avengers Infinity War is the best MCU movie and a top 3 superhero movie of all time. This really was the peak of the MCU. Like when this dropped, everyone was going crazy, and the hype was insane, but it really did deliver, and to this day, it's still a really fun movie that I rewatch pretty often. It's just so awesome seeing these characters meet each other for the first time and pair up. The chemistry between them is the best part of the movie, especially the Guardians and their chemistry with Thor and the other Avengers they meet. Thanos also is the GOAT. 9 out of 10. The Shining is not my favorite Kubrick movie, but it is the best Kubrick movie on this list. They picked some weird ones, to be honest, but The Shining is still an awesome movie and one of the best horror movies. It's not really scary, but it's just Kubrick being the legend that he is. The cinematography in this movie is so good, it makes it feel cold and lonely, which makes the crazy shit that goes on in the climax even more shocking and intense. The performances are great here too, especially Nicholson. I think it's interesting this movie is so famous because it is really weird and very different from other classic horror movies.
as it's more focused on technical and existential crap instead of scary dudes and jump scares. But I don't really like those movies, so I'm not complaining. 9 out of 10. Requiem for a Dream is one of those movies that just makes you want to curl up into a ball when you finish it. It's an infamously disturbing movie, and that's because it really is just a messed up story about a bunch of young people that are put in horrible situations. The movie is about drugs and the impact it has on your life, and how it affects everything around you. But it's not a normal anti-drug movie, because it never once glamorizes it, like some movies do. A lot of anti-drug movies like The Wolf of Wall Street start off making drugs look fun, and then have one scene at the end that make it look horrible. This movie never once does that, and portrays it accurately as something that does only harm to people's lives. The soundtrack is awesome too. 9 out of 10. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is one of the best movies that focuses on a relationship. You get to see all the history these two characters and their relationship have, and it does such a good job at getting you connected to them. Both Joel and Clementine can seem unlikable at times, but it just makes them feel more realistic and genuine. There are times where you think they are better off without each other, and I think that adds to the complicated nature of their romance. 9 out of 10. Toy Story 3 is one of those childhood movies that I still love so much to this day. I actually think this is another Pixar movie that gets better with age. You can relate to letting things from your childhood go and moving on with your life. It's an event that every teenager goes through, and this movie nails the feelings that you get when doing it. The ending is obviously the best part of this movie, and still gets me emotional every time, but the whole movie is pretty awesome as well. Definitely the funniest Toy Story movie, and seeing the main characters develop is just so cool. 9 out of 10. The Empire Strikes Back is the peak of Star Wars because it's the one that dives the most into the characters. The main characters from the original trilogy are the heart of Star Wars, and their presence has been a part of everything that has came out from the franchise. Luke learns the Force and goes through moments that leave an impact on his journey and his mentality. Leia and Han Solo start to build a romance, and their characters are given way more attention than in the first movie. Darth Vader finally starts to feel like a villain that works perfectly for Luke. Even the side characters are at an all-time best here. Yoda is here, Lando, Palpatine. I mean, this movie has the most legendary plot twist of all time, and the whole movie is incredible, and one of the best sequels ever. 9 out of 10. Das Boot is a pretty obscure movie for this list, and it's one that I had on my watch list for as long as I can remember. I finally watched it for this list, and yeah, it's as awesome as I thought it would be. It is definitely a movie not for everyone. Even the fact that it's in German will turn some people off, but it definitely doesn't help that it's one of the most uncomfortable movies on this list. It takes place almost entirely on a submarine, filled with dirty and dark rooms and people that all look like they haven't showered in months. It's also anxiety-inducing the whole time, but I just love it, and I think it successfully puts you in the shoes of these soldiers in a way that stays entertaining despite how gross it feels. I watched a 3-hour director's cut, but there are shorter versions to watch if you don't like the length. 9 out of 10. The Silence of the Lambs is one of the best 90s crime movies because it focuses entirely on the characters instead of boring and repetitive crime shit. Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins both deliver some of the best performances of all time. Obviously, Hopkins is constantly praised as one of the best performances ever, but I think Foster gets a little disrespected because she is also awesome and gives her character so much depth. They both do such a good job at making their characters interesting and engaging, and the mystery that they are a part of also makes the movie terrifying and thrilling. This is a pretty flawless movie in my opinion, with some of the best acting of all time. 10 out of 10. So now every movie I think is a 10 out of 10 masterpiece, and they're all some of my favorite movies ever. Like putting Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse at 24 on any list feels really weird, but something has to be here, and this is one of the 10s that I have the smallest connection to, just because it came out very recently. But this movie is absolutely amazing. I've seen it like 5 times since it came out because it's just non-stop awesomeness. This is literally the longest animated movie ever, but it still felt like 30 minutes long because it never slows down. I can't wait for the third one, but that won't come out for a long time, sadly. 10 out of 10. 12 Angry Men is one of those old classics that I rarely see get disrespected. Like, I never hear the too slow or boring complaint that other old movies get, and that's so impressive because this is the exact type of movie that a lot of people would find boring. Like, it's literally just 12 dudes in a room talking. Nobody leaves this tiny area until the final minute, but every second is perfectly done and has you glued to the screen. The screenplay here is just amazing. Like, the case is constantly evolving, and you react to it along with these characters, who all have unique things that make them interesting. Fuck the racist guy though. 10 out of 10. Schindler's List is easily the best Spielberg movie. Like, I sometimes can't believe the man who made Ready Player One made Schindler's List. This is one of the darkest and most emotional movies ever. It's the peak of Holocaust movies, because it brings in a sense of hope. It shows how even in the worst time period in modern history, where humans committed the worst atrocities they've ever committed, one person can still save the life of thousands. The acting from Neeson and Fiennes is also amazing, and they both deserved Oscars. Their characters showed the difference between a hero and a villain perfectly, and how humans do have the opportunity to be good, but they are too selfish to do that a lot of the time. 10 out of 10. I didn't talk about Pulp Fiction at all in my Tarantino movie, because obviously, it's the best, and I'm gonna keep that a running theme whenever it gets brought up. 10 out of 10. The Godfather is the most famous movie ever, probably. When people compare a movie to another movie, The Godfather is the most common comparison, and that's because it's just pretty amazing. The acting is amazing, especially from Brando, who gives arguably his best performance. The screenplay is amazing. The direction from Coppola makes this thing feel like a true epic. The cinematography is awesome. The score is one of the most famous for a reason. I mean, everything is pretty much perfect. 10 out of 10. Ikaru is the first and not the last Kurosawa movie that will show up on this list. It's actually number 100 at the time I'm writing this on the IMDB Top 100 list, which is pretty interesting. Kurosawa is probably my favorite director, either him or Bergman, and Ikaru is one of his best movies. It's not a samurai movie, which is what he's most known for. It's just about an old guy who learns that he's dying from cancer. You see him start to regret how he lived his life, and he begins to make a real impact and do what he really wants to do. It can get pretty emotional at times, especially the more intimate and quiet scenes, and this movie is full of them. This is maybe Kurosawa's most mature movie, and it is one that will genuinely change your perspective on life. 10 out of 10. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is the most famous Western of all time, and it deserves all the praise it gets. I mean, I'm a huge Sergio Leone fan. He's going to show up even more on this list, and this movie just has everything that makes him such an amazing director. All three of the main leads are badass and awesome, especially Clint Eastwood, who was at peak awesomeness in this movie. The soundtrack from Morricone is so iconic, and is still referenced to this day, and that's because it's just amazing, maybe the best soundtrack of all time. The plot is pretty simple, but it allows for the cinematography and the atmosphere to shine until it all unfolds in a legendary duel scene. This movie is awesome, and will always be awesome. 10 out of 10. Your Name is a movie I was very happy to see on here because I have loved it for a long time. It's one of my favorite anime movies, and that's saying something because I have watched a ton of anime. There's so many moments in this movie that literally give me goosebumps every time I think of them, especially the one scene where they meet up. I get emotional whenever I see that frame online. But the whole movie, even the less emotional first half, is really funny, and the characters have great chemistry. The soundtrack is also beautiful, and plays in my head all the time. I know a lot of film bros are anime haters, but that's because they don't give it a shot. This movie is one of my favorites, and one of the select few movies that has made me cry, and I think many people have similar experiences with it if they give it a fair shot. 10 out of 10. Once Upon a Time in America is another Sergio Leone movie, but it's very different from his other ones. It's not a western, it's a mob gangster movie. It also came out in the 80s and stars Robert De Niro, unlike most of his most famous stuff which starred Clint Eastwood and came out in the 60s. But this movie is just so amazing. It's a really long movie, well over 3 hours long, but I was so invested the entire time in watching Noodles and his story. It's a brutal movie. There will be things Noodles does that will make you want to kill him. And that works because it gives you a realistic and detailed look on how someone gets caught up with this horrible and evil lifestyle. The backstory segment sets up the older Noodles perfectly. Instead of just going lightning fast and focusing on key events like a Goodfellas, it dives deep into his most meaningful relationships and the things that make him a unique person, and then it strips all that away later as he gets older, and it's heartbreaking. It also has probably his best cinematography and another amazing Morricone score. 10 out of 10. Interstellar is one of my favorite movies. I've already said that. Out of the director rankings I've done, this is the best movie, I think, and this is where it compares when put against some of the best of all time. 10 out of 10. High and Low is another Kurosawa movie, and it is just one of the best directed movies ever. The script of this movie is pretty good, the kidnapping plot is pretty interesting, but this movie just has this punch to it that puts it over the hump. It's something that you can understand when you watch the movie. Everything is done perfectly, each act is as entertaining as the other, the acting, especially from Toshiro Mifune, is amazing. This is just watching a man at the peak of their abilities, and somehow it's not even his best movie on this list. 10 out of 10. Come and See is the most miserable and disturbing movie I have ever watched. I don't blame people who avoid this movie for their whole lives because of its reputation. I watched it one time and I never plan on watching it again. But I also think this is the most accurate movie about the horrors of World War II. There's no adventure here, just a boy who slowly dies on the inside after being a victim to the worst thing that any group of humans has done. The cinematography makes it feel like you were there with him, even using different techniques like first-person perspective, and it makes it even more brutal. I genuinely felt sick watching this movie, which means it definitely succeeded in what it was trying to do. It's arguably the best anti-war movie of all time. 10 out of 10. Harakiri is the highest rated movie on Letterboxd, which I think has made it gain some popularity in some recent years. It totally deserves every bit of attention it gets because it is one of the best samurai movies of all time. It would be number 2 on my list, but I think there was a time where I had it at number 1. It dives more into human suffering and revenge, instead of heroes and villains like a lot of samurai movies. The story is about the main character, and all the horrible things that happened to him, and how it led him to the situation he is in. It also focuses on Japanese culture and the absurdity of it, which is interesting and also unique to the samurai genre. The cinematography here is also mind-blowing, probably better than any Kurosawa movie. 10 out of 10. The Shawshank Redemption is the number 1 highest rated movie on the IMDB Top 100, and I really don't have a problem with that. Obviously, I don't agree, because it's not my number 1, but if there was a movie to be number 1, this one is not a bad pick. It's a movie about having hope in situations that seem hopeless. It's not a dark and miserable movie like a lot of other highly rated movies on here, which I like, because optimistic stories like this need to be told. You can't have a list full of Schindler's Lists or everyone else will just be depressed and miserable. But there's one part in this movie that focuses on Brooks that, in my opinion, is the best scene of the movie. It shows the effect that the prison system and being separated from the real world has on people, but it doesn't hold back anything. It makes the good shit that happens at the end a lot more satisfying though. 10 out of 10. City of God is a movie that sucks you in immediately and feels like a roller coaster the whole time. It shows the lives of two people who grew up in the same situation but took very different life paths. The main character wants to be a humble photographer and doesn't want any part of drug dealing and gang violence, while the villain, Lil Z, who is one of the scariest villains of all time, becomes a gang leader and the most feared man in his favela. But the movie goes so deep into the lives that these people live, it shows moments that are more human instead of portraying the criminals as straight up evil. There's a scene where Lil Z just has to talk to a girl and he fails miserably. It just puts it into perspective that these people were just kids, like all of us, and were in much worse situations that never gave them any hope to begin with. It's a movie I have in the back of my mind all the time, a real life changer, that's also edited amazingly and is super entertaining. It checks all the boxes. 10 out of 10. Spirited Away is another Ghibli movie and my favorite Hayao Miyazaki movie. This is another movie where it's been talked about like 100 times, and I also plan on making a Miyazaki video, so I don't know how much I want to talk about it. It's just a beautiful movie from an animation standpoint, but the plot and entire atmosphere is also beautiful. The whole thing is just beautiful. I love it. 10 out of 10. Narrowing down my favorite animated movie of all time is difficult, and it usually comes down to Spirited Away and Grave of the Fireflies. Tomorrow maybe Spirited Away would be number 1, but today the emotion that Grave of the Fireflies creates is really resonating with me. This is one of the saddest movies ever. You hear that all the time, and it's true. It's about a young boy and his little sister trying to survive during the horrible state that Japan was in during World War II. The movie does a great job at getting you attached to these two kids, and you really start to hope that they end up safe. But there's a feeling deep down the whole time that you know it won't end well. This is a movie that not only made me cry, but also just sucked the life out of me. I remember my hand being numb when I went to grab a piece of popcorn, and genuinely just feeling empty for a long time after finishing it. I'm never watching this thing again. One time was enough. Still a masterpiece though. 10 out of 10. Cinema Paradiso is a massive movie that tells the life of a boy, from a young child to an older man. And my god, does this movie hit like a bitch. You see these types of movies a lot, where it's a coming of age about one person, but nothing comes close to this. You get to know everything about Toto, his family, his friends, and his passions and interests. But the one mainstay thing in this movie is his friend Alfredo. Toto and Alfredo have a lifelong friendship that might be my favorite friendship in all of movies. Well, number 2, number 1 is locked up for sure. Their relationship has ups and downs, it's not always perfect, and they both do things to each other that seem pretty bad, but they never waver, and you can tell that they genuinely care for each other, which makes the ending just obliterate me every time. Yeah, the ending is one of the best ever, but the whole thing's great, and everything Toto goes through, you're right there with him. Morricone was also cooking here. 10 out of 10. Seven Samurai is my favorite Akira Kurosawa movie and my favorite samurai movie. Actually, it's my favorite Japanese movie as well, come to think about it. Yeah, this movie is just epic, if I could describe it in a word. It's over 3 hours long, as an intermission, a long and eventful plot that has so many plot lines. I mean, all of these characters get some attention, with obviously Toshiro Mifune being the most layered character here. The acting from everyone here is perfect, especially Mifune, who is one of the best actors ever, and this is his best performance in my opinion. It's pretty similar thematically to Harakiri, focusing on samurai culture and how poverty and class dictates your life, with some incredible monologues. But I think the scale is just so much bigger here than in Harakiri, which could have been messed up, but Kurosawa just does everything perfectly. The score also rules. 10 out of 10. In the top 5, we got Apocalypse Now. This is my favorite war movie of all time, which is interesting because there's not really that much war in it. Like, obviously it's about the Vietnam War, but a lot of it is just these dudes losing their minds on a boat. It also focuses a lot on humans and how they begin to get used to the war and start to find a home in it. The Kilgore character is very iconic because he embodies these themes, as he loves the war and doesn't even want it to end, and this is interesting on its own, but then it gets real good when Brando comes in. This is one of the best performances of all time. Brando just steals the whole movie as soon as he comes in. His character is so awesome. He has only a few monologues, but all of them are incredible and provide interesting perspectives on the war and America as a whole, and Brando delivers all of them perfectly, especially the grocery clerk one. This is also an intoxicating movie, which is right up my alley. Like, there's so many bright colors and trippy looking shots, especially the end scene, which is one of my favorite scenes ever. As soon as The End by The Doors kicks in, which is the best use of a song in any movie, the movie starts to spiral into insanity, and you're literally just watching that scene speechless as you're getting transported to another world. That's basically this whole movie, just starting to lose your mind as the main character gets increasingly deeper into the war. 10 out of 10. Once Upon a Time in the West is my favorite Western of all time. I love Sergio Leone and his ability to make every scene tense, and how he just tests your patience until the payoff comes, and then it exceeded all your expectations. This is his best movie in my opinion, and I think that's because of the characters. It focuses on a girl who moves into this town, and immediately gets caught up with 3 different dudes. The coolest 2 dudes are Henry Fonda, as this evil guy who kills a kid literally a minute into his introduction, and some nameless guy who plays a harmonica and wants to kill Henry Fonda. This is the most interesting plotline for sure, and that's because both of these guys are just awesome and badass. The final duel scene is amazing and better than The Good, the Bad, the Ugly when it comes to final duels in my opinion. Other than that though, that unique Leone atmosphere is also at its peak here. Scenes move at a snail's pace at times to really set up the tone, and the long stairs and walking scenes are also all over the place, which is awesome. Morricone also gives maybe his best score here, which makes this movie also feel intoxicating. Like, this is a mesmerizing movie, and it is one of my favorites. 10 out of 10. I feel a little lame making my top 3 just the Lord of the Rings movies, but like, what do you want me to do? They are my favorite movies. They're probably my favorite pieces of media, to be honest. Hunter x Hunter is the only thing that comes close. The Two Towers, I guess, is the worst of the trilogy, but it still has some of the best scenes of all time. I don't want to spend a ton of time on these movies individually. Maybe I'll make a video one day. 10 out of 10. The Fellowship of the Ring is the perfect introduction into these characters and the world of Middle-earth. Every year I watch these movies in one day, and Fellowship is always so fun, because you get to see where this massive story started. All the characters are introduced for the first time, and it's so fun. The ending where Sam chases after Frodo still gives me goosebumps every time. That's the best movie friendship right there. 10 out of 10. Return of the King is my favorite movie of all time. Obviously, by the way, these are all the extended editions, just to reassure everyone. Yeah, I mean, this movie literally has like 10 of my favorite scenes. My favorite is probably when Sam carries Frodo, but I feel like a villain picking just one, so I'm just gonna stop trying. The score of these movies I think beats out any Morricone score, as I think it is the best of all time. I cried like 3 different times watching this movie, and I think the score definitely helps make it even more emotional. I see a lot of people debate Fellowship and Return of the King, but I just think this movie has too much awesome stuff going on for anything to be better than it. 10 out of 10. This list isn't that bad. It kinda starts off rough with a lot of movies that I don't really like, but then it gets good. I mean, 25% of the movies I gave a 10 out of 10, so yeah, it's a pretty damn good list.